Hurts lost it for Smith. It's a touchdown. Devontae Smith.
Bijan Robinson. Give him the ball. Touchdown, Texas. He's got room. Lamar Jackson. Open field. Inside the 20. He is in. Lamar. Spectacular.
Welcome back to the Saturday Air Raid, part of the NFL Lab Network. I'm your host, John Roberts, and with me today, as my two good friends, Brad Bolt and Dan O'Connell. Gentlemen, how are we today?
Back for another week. This is exciting again.
You stuck around. That's good.
Yeah, we did.
Had nothing else to do, so we thought, why not come back and talk some more football?
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that. And hey, congratulations, NFL Lab Network, on the clean sweep of the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yes.
Well done, guys. Nah, it's a great charity event, and this will be year number 3 for me. So I'm pumped to be back in it again, and it's good to see you got in for. This is first time, isn't it, John, for you?
Second, because you've obviously forgotten. But this whole show, we should probably mention this now, this whole show is born out of the Scott Fish Bowl because we're all in SFB 11 together. And thanks to Rowan, friend of the show, for organising the Australia group chat. And here we are today. So if it wasn't for Scott Fish Bowl, we wouldn't be doing this show. Or we might not be.
Because what division were you in that year?
So do you remember, I was in that kind of weird division that got a lot of chatter on Twitter because someone in the group kept drafting Cleveland Browns players, and they were dead set, like, no, this is going to actually win me the league. They were a Cleveland Browns supporter as well, or fan. and it got traction because we also had Dwayne McFarlane, who at the time was with PFF, and now he's with Fantasy Life. And he started tweeting about it, and then it just kind of exploded from there. But that was what a time to be alive that was. Was
Scott SFB 11, that was the one, was that the one where the guy went to go and draft Saquon Barkley second and he drafted Matt Barkley first? Matt Barkley instead?
Oh, yeah. That also happened.
I thought that was that year. I could actually see that happening this year where everyone goes to draft Bijan Robinson and they draft Brian Robinson instead.
That'd be fantastic. Oh, man, we're going to have to stay on top of all the shenanigans of this year. But yeah, no, it's good that we're all back for another season, so it should be fun.
I'm just glad it's on Sleeper this year now as well.
Yeah, that'll be nice as well. I am in a Sleeper division as well.
Easier to navigate.
Great show for you today for our second episode of Saturday Air Raid. We're going to be going over, ambitiously, I wanted to tackle quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. We're high on and low end last week. We didn't get to do all of them in one show, unfortunately. In fact, we only got through one position. So this week we're going to do running backs. And I think we've got a few really good ones as well, I'm excited for. But before we jump into that,
we can talk.
Yeah, exactly. Before we jump into that, there was a tweet going around on Twitter just with a list of a few free agents that are still available that haven't been picked up yet. I wanted to get your thoughts. You've had a look at the list. There's some good names on here. Obviously, Dalvin Cook's there. DeAndre Hopkins is there. Carson Wentz is there. Then you got some other people like DJ Fluke is there, but he's working out with the Eagles right now, but we're still not sure. Kyle Van Noy's there. Are there names on that list that you're surprised to see on that list?
I would say yes. I'm just looking at the list now. I'm surprised at this point of the off season that we haven't seen guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue. I'm surprised they haven't been signed up. Just looking at the list as well. Sort of surprised too that you've got in the running backs. We've still got Dalvin Cook. You've still got Zeke. Kareem Hunt.
So the one that stands out to me the most is Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, that was my next one. I was surprised that they're there, but I mean,
all the names on that list,
you're looking at a couple of the named wide receivers. The only one there who I think would be close to signing a deal might be Hopkins, but the rest of those other guys might be, mid-season if there's some injuries to some teams and they
I actually didn't mind.
Guys.
I actually didn't mind T.Y. Hilton on the Cowboys towards the end of last year. I thought he did some sort of good stuff. Obviously, it's going to be like a much more crowded receiving corps, and that's why they're going a different direction. Remember, James Washington's back now from his he missed the entire season.
And Brandon Cooks is there as well.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point.
So, they're three receivers. You're going to have CD Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup as their starting trio of receivers. But I think that you guys like Jarvis Landry, T.Y. Hilton, even Julio might be those sorts of guys who 4 or 5 weeks into the season get picked up. Sign for an injury cover if a team, even take, for example, like for me, like the Panthers, if they have Adam Thielen, DJ Chark go down with injuries, their wide receiver core is quite depleted straight away sort of thing. So that's where a guy like a Julio or a Jarvis Landry or a T.Y. Hilton might be those sorts of signings once the season starts and, mid-season experienced veterans who won't take too long to actually come in and pick up the playbooks quickly and be able to go out and play straight away.
Who's going to take the gamble on Kenny G?
I think he's done. I think everyone in their mum saw his level of effort last year and the year before, and they would just be like, do not want any part of that.
I can't see a team taking a chance on him, mate.
Yeah,
I think Argonauts looking for someone in the CFL. Or?
Hey, they're doing well, my Argonauts. I think N'Keal Harry's probably got a better chance of being signed at this point. Right? Question mark.
That are going to slip through, I think, from this.
Yeah, I'm sure once cut down day comes about, there'll be a few. I think most teams will sort of like figure it out, and then a couple will get signed. Kyle Van Noy, I'm pretty surprised is on that list as well.
There's a few defensive players that you can plug in.
Yeah.
But I think they're starting to they're getting to the age now where you're not going to really get a full season out of them. Kind of thing. So I think, like Brad said, I think a lot of players are just going to wait for injuries to come up. And we'll see a lot of injuries, unfortunately, during preseason and training camps as well. So,
and we even saw late last year for the Eagles when they signed Ndamukong Suh towards the end of the year. Like, there's some of these guys on this list, like your Robert Quinns, Trey Flowers, Kyle Van Noy's, Justin Houston's there, the Anthony Barr's, they're the type of guys to me that a team might be looking to pick up, say, your week 11, your week 12. Hey, we don't need you for the first 3 months, 4 months of the season. We need you for the playoff sort of thing. Like these could be the guys who have the big impact on teams. And like even looking at the offensive linemen, like Taylor Lewan, Eric Fisher, George Fancy, Roger Saffold, Justin Pugh, Gabe Jackson, Dalton Reisner. I would have thought some of them might have been snapped up by now. But as Dan was saying, preseason, you quite often see lots of injuries. You see guys that were signed in the off-season who don't quite work out the way that they were planning on it. And sometimes you find teams who end up being a lot better than what they were originally expected to be. So, come your week 10 to 12 range, you're going, okay, now that we're actually making a playoff push, now we need some depth there. We need these guys. We even saw it, what was it, last year when the Cowboys signed 41-year-old Jason Peters.
Yeah, for sure.
It was for that depth sort of thing. And he ended up playing a role and helped fill in during the season and was able to be there in the playoffs for them. So that's where I'm thinking a lot of these veterans might end up as being, okay, if they're not ready for camp, they're the guys who, weeks 10 through about 13 will be sought after by them, because I don't think, have we actually ever gone through an entire week without having one major injury to an important person on a team in a season? It never feels like it.
No, never happens. Yeah. One of the downsides of the sport that we love. So, like I was saying at the top of the show, awesome show for you today. We're going to do running backs that we're high on and running backs that we're low on. And I feel like this is the perfect time of year, part of the year, to be doing this, because it's not necessarily we're saying we plant our flags and we really like these guys and we're going to go after them. But it is sort of saying, like, I think that they're too low or I think that they're too high and I want them on my team. Here's the way I was thinking of going. I think let's go, Brad. We'll start with you. And then, Dan, we'll move to your running back that you're high on. And then we'll finish on mine because mine might lead in nicely to running backs that we're low on, as I learned today. So maybe we can have a back and forth conversation. Yeah, how does that sound?
Sounds good to me. So my running back that I am a lot higher on than others is currently on Fantasy Pros in the Dynasty rankings. And yes, I used Dynasty rankings this week. I looked at the right one.
Thank you.
Miles Sanders of the Carolina Panthers.
Oh,
now, it's not just because it's not just because I'm a Panthers fan, but I was just looking at some of his stats from last year. Football Outsiders who do DVOA, he was third in success rate for running backs last season, and the two that were in front of him were Cordarelle Patterson and Isaiah Pacheco. So
that's awesome.
And effective, and also for effective yards, he was third in effective yards behind Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb. Like that's from the Football Outsiders. But even he had the year 294 carries, 1,419 yards with 13 rushing touchdowns. And he really seemed to find his stride within that Eagles offense. Now, I know it's the Eagles offense dropping down to the Carolina Panthers offense, but if you look at what the Panthers O-line was able to do last year, they were a much more improved and actually a quite good offensive line. And
yeah, for sure. Like Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, they played well when they were given their opportunities individually.
Yeah, Deontay Foreman nearly went for 1,000 yards after Christian McCaffrey left. So
they're able games.
Yeah, and Miles Sanders is joining back up with Duce Staley, who's running backs coach in Carolina this year. So he was in Philadelphia for Sanders' rookie year. And Sanders had a great year last year, but some of his numbers were actually down in comparison to previous years. So he wasn't as utilized as much in the passing game last year as he had been previous years. And so I was looking here, his yards after the catch for his first 3 seasons in the NFL were 8.2 yards after the catch, 7.8, and then 8.3. Last year in Philly, it dropped down to 4.9 yards after the catch. So he wasn't being used very often in the passing game or for as much, and that even equates them back into yards per route run. So just trying not to go too nerdy here with the stats, but yards per route run, the more yards that you have in that, the better sort of the more elite numbers that you have. And his rookie year, he had 1.53 yards per route run in his rookie year, 0.67 and 0.84 in his first 3 years. And then last year it dropped down to 0.28 yards per route run. So that pretty much is just saying that his usage last year was literally, we don't want you to get downfield. We want you to just stand 2 yards, well, not even a yard in front of Jalen Hurts. And if you need the ball, it'll get dropped down to you, and that's about it. Whereas I think we saw in college with Bryce Young last year, his best weapon in the offense last year was throwing the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs.
For sure. I had Miles Sanders on my redraft team last year, and it was very reluctantly. It was because I think I drafted him in the 7th or 8th round as my RB2 to pair with Breece Hall. And I wasn't feeling great about it, but I did. The year before that, Miles Sanders was famous for having 0 touchdowns on the entire season. And in my mind, I was like, that has to change. That has to get better. Last year, it did get better, obviously. So he scored, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 touchdowns. So that really came back to where it should be, which kind of ties in nicely to a guy that I'm high on. But I do really also like the contract that he signed, 4 years, $25 million to be the guy in Carolina. I think that that's a good deal, and I think it's a great landing spot for him at 26.
And you look at his the backfield, like the committee that's in Carolina, it's him, it's Chuba Hubbard, who was the previous regime's draft pick, and if anyone's watched those draft documentaries, you can actually see the year that Chuba Hubbard was drafted. Matt Rule's in the draft room and says about 10 minutes before their pick, he gets a text message from his wife saying, "I really like Chuba Hubbard here." And so then 10 minutes later, he drafts Chuba Hubbard. So, is he Frank Reich's type of running back? I don't know. But then after that, it's Raheem Blackshear and Spencer Brown. That's the running back room in Carolina, and Cameron Peoples, who's an undrafted free agent out of Appalachian State, who I quite like, who I could actually see jump in front of a guy like Chuba Hubbard, depending on how camp and everything goes for him. So if there's not much competition, that's the kind of running back that I would like. And especially, too, with a guy like Bryce Young, who, as I said, likes to dump the ball off to his running back, he's going to become Bryce Young's best friend and can see an uptick in points from last year. So he might drop a little bit of maybe efficiency from his running perspective to what he had with Philadelphia last year, who had the best offensive line in football. He might drop down to still a top 10 offensive line, but he might then pick up those points he's lost in the receiving game, which will help you, especially if you're in like a PPR league. And, his rookie season, I think he had 50 catches in his rookie season or something close to that. So, he's a guy who, as I said, I'm trying to get as much as possible on my teams if I can.
I love it. I'm all aboard the Miles Sanders train. He's going running back 20 in redraft and running back 21 in dynasty. And there's lots of players like DeAndre Swift is going ahead of him. J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams, these guys who are coming off injury. I understand that that's probably more of like a long-term sort of lens at it, but I think that the path for Miles Sanders is so clear. And like you're saying, like Chuba is a fantastic complementary piece. Obviously, Chuba's not going to be the one. He might have a game where, if Sanders is injured, he'll take over, but he wouldn't keep that. I don't think Chuba would sustain that for any longer than a game or two. I think it's Miles Sanders' job to lose.
No,
and his rookie season, just looking at his stats now, his rookie season, Miles Sanders rushed for 818 yards and then had 50 receptions for 509 yards. So he's pretty much given you the 1,400 yards that Miles Sanders had last year with the Eagles. He pretty much gave you that in his rookie year. And that was also in a team last year when you think with the Eagles who had Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, who were getting run, they were using a true running back by committee. So they still might use that a bit in Carolina, but you might see it more a 70-30 split or an 80-20 split as opposed to a 40-30-30 split that Philly was running last year.
And I think they'll lean on him fairly often early on in the year as well, while Bryce Young finds his feet. So it's set up pretty well for him to start off on fire and then just take advantage of that as well and keep building momentum as the season goes on.
And think about keep going.
Like you said, he's 26 as well, so he's still got at least a couple of good years left in him, and he hasn't been used a heap early on in his career. He's still got a fair bit of still got a bit of tread on the tires to keep going as well for a few more years, I think.
And Bryce Young had threw 44 receptions to Jahmyr Gibbs at Alabama in the final year together. So I don't foresee Bryce Young taking away as many first down attempts, goal line attempts, rushing touchdown attempts as Bryce Young will in his sort of first season or potentially sort of first couple of games. So you're right. He's got the contract. He's got the fantastic coaching staff that, I think we think is going to do well. Great defense to keep him fresh. And I think he's in a good system. I think he's in a good place. RB21 is it's way too low. I think you'd be drafting him at your floor if you took him there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Dan, you haven't given us a peek behind the curtain yet, so I've been waiting all day in anticipation.
I haven't yet for this one, no. So I had a couple that I was a bit higher on than what consensus is, and one of them's It's not that much higher because of where he's initially ranked, but it's Ramondre Stephenson, and he's at RB12 overall. I think he's got the potential to be a top 10 lock because you look at what's behind him on that depth chart and there's not an awful lot there. Damian Harris is now gone. Stevenson's shown he's a good receiver, so he's got the numbers there in the receiving game. He's got the possibility to be a bell cow in that offense as well. And he only scored 5 touchdowns last year. I think if they get any sort of better play out of the quarterbacks this year, I think that number will go up a decent amount as well. He could reach double-digit touchdowns on the season as well. So having him at RB12 is a good spot for him, but I think he'll finish even higher than that personally. And I think moving forward, he'll prove to be the guy as well. I know Bill Belichick looks to go a lot of committee backfields, but when he's had the guy there, he's been known to use him. And I think we'll see that with Stephenson moving forward as well.
So I've got a question though. So the top 10 at the moment. So you've got Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and Kenneth Walker. Who, out of that 10, who would you think, say 9 of them are going to finish in that top 10, who's the one out of that 10 that drops out that he replaces?
I can give you 2, but I'll wait on one. Kenneth Walker, to me, will finish behind Ramondre Stephenson. So I'd move him back.
I have a really hard time buying into Patriots running backs. And I've been thinking about Ramondre Stephenson a lot because he's getting a lot of hype and praise. And I think it's because everyone sees that the 69 catches last year is a really nice, safe, sort of floor to put on top of the 210 rushing attempts. He had nearly 1,500 scrimmage yards in total, and then just the 6 touchdowns for the year. And I think people expect that to increase. And like you say, there's not a lot behind him, but also it doesn't take a lot to impress Bill Belichick. He's been known to bring guys out of nowhere, like Ty Montgomery's on the team, and he's getting a lot of training camp hype at the moment. But I think that I'm in the minority when I say these things. I need to get over my Patriots stigmatism that I've sort of developed over the years.
I think we all have as well for fantasy.
Yeah, it scares me. And he's going quite high now in Dynasty, RB11, redraft, RB10. That's high. That's very high for me.
So I'll play quickly with both of you guys, a name game. So I'm going to throw out some names and you tell me who you like more, Ramondre or this player. So Ramondre or Josh Jacobs?
Josh Jacobs.
Ramondre or Austin Eckler?
Eckler? For Dynasty?
For the next 2 years, it's still Eckler.
So Eckler's currently behind Ramondre.
Oh, actually, I would take Ramondre in Dynasty.
Okay, so Ramondre or Nick Chubb?
Nick Chubb.
Ramondre.
Oh, wow.
Ramondre or Damian Pierce?
I'm not a Damian Pierce guy.
Is that a serious question, or are you just throwing one in there?
I'm just curious to see I'm trying to get your vibe on, guys. So.
Ramondre is about 10 spots higher at least.
Yeah, he's 8 spots higher in redraft. I'm actually
last one.
Yeah, go.
Last one. Najee or Ramondre?
Ramondre.
Najee, I'm a big Najee guy as well. And he's not who I was talking about. I was tossing up between him and Travis Etienne. Was my 2 that I was tossing up between today.
No, so it's just curious just to see some of those names, because I think for the majority of them, I would probably have Ramondre ahead of them. But there are some guys that I still do like a little bit more than Ramondre just based on previous seasons. Like Austin Eckler is a guy who, yes, it's the last, there was talk of the trade and things like that, but he just always seems to get the volume, the touchdowns, the catches, just everything. Now that could change now with the new offensive coordinator, but it's just interesting game. Sometimes I like to look at where you're looking at these guys, like who would you rather have, this guy or that guy?
Yeah.
And to see where everyone else's vibe is on these players as well, because, you know, like you said, as you were saying, John, sometimes you can have your bias towards Patriots running backs.
Yeah.
And I know I've been like that too with certain teams and certain players, but then as you start saying the names out loud, you're like, okay, maybe I'm not as biased as what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I found. So I was fleshing out my rankings while we were doing research for this show. And it's funny you talk about Eckler with him, because I think I've swapped those two about 4 times before I settled on it. And I've got Ramondre I've got him at RB8, and I've got Austin Eckler at RB9. And I could easily switch them back and forth as well. So those two are right there. And the only issue I have with Eckler is he's 28. We know he's got one more season confirmed in LA. Does he stay around after this year? And where does he, if not, where does he go? And how does he get used in that new offense? And what sort of schemes Kellen Moore going to run there now as well? Are they going to look for Herbert to push the ball downfield more and not, like we call Herbert the dump-off king? Is he going to push the ball downfield more and then Eckler loses out on touches that way? So I think that's it's a fine line between those two, I think, for Dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole thing with Austin Eckler as well. Like, I love him for this year, but he did try and go out and get a big deal that no one gave him, and we don't know what's going to happen after this year. So in a redraft, I got him very, very high. I think I got him 2 or 3, but in Dynasty he falls way, way down. I think I've got him RB 17.
My other one I was looking at I was trying to go a bit further down just to see if there's someone that's going to jump up from where they are. And I kept looking at James Cook. And I know I'm going to get so much pushback on him because he's not going to be that – he's not going to have a high volume of touches. But I think they can use him so much better than what they did last year. And they brought in Damian Harris. So Devin Singletary's gone. I think he had 187 carries last year, Singletary. So you'd expect Harris to come in and basically take most of those, if not all of them. But I think Harris will have more than that, though. And James Cook only carried the ball 89 times last year. So I think he's got the scope to push that above 100 or thereabouts. But I think the thing is, Damian Harris isn't a receiver. Devin Singletary had 38 catches last year, and James Cook only had 21. I think James Cook has more than enough potential to break that 50 catch mark this year. And I know the Bills don't tend to use their running backs as much like that, but if he takes the majority of the receptions from Singletary, then he's looking at an easy 50 catch season, plus whatever other boost he can get in the running game, because they'll use him more than what they did in the running game this year for sure. So he's way down at RB 32, I think, on Fantasy Pros, RB 30. I wouldn't be surprised if he can push up into that late RB2 range. The chances of it happening, who knows? But if it does happen, I wouldn't be shocked at all, just on how I think they can use him this year.
My thoughts on the Buffalo Bills running backs is pretty much, John, like what you think about the New England running back sort of thing. Like until I see a consistent workload for the Bills running backs, then I'll believe it. But until then, it's, you know, they seem like to me a great in theory running back duo. But until I see it, I don't think I can believe it until then.
Yeah, that's not how we play Dynasty though, Brad.
Well, I mean, like, this is my thing with the Patriots running backs. Like, let's look at the names: Ramondre Stephenson, Damian Harris, Sony Michel, Dion Lewis, LeGarrette Blount. Like, I can go on. The amount of names who have churned through that RB like leading rushers on the season. They haven't had a single rusher string leading 3 seasons in a row since 2005, 2006, 2004, 2005, 2006. So,
who's on the roster now, though? Who's taking carries away from Stephenson?
But would you have said that Dion Lewis was Patriots' leading rusher of 2017, or like I don't? Yeah, I think I need to come around on the fandom for Ramondre Stevenson, because I can definitely see that.
I know where you're coming from, because we can go off like that preconceived bias against teams because we've seen it in the past.
Yeah, schematically.
But then you get certain players that come along, and then the coach goes, "Okay, we need to change how we do things a little bit."
Yeah. And that's a good point, because this will be taking pressure off Mac Jones, right?
Yeah, I've got nothing else to add. So, John, who's your guy?
All right, let's turn the lights down. My lights are down. Let's turn the mic on. Travis Etienne. I am very high on Travis Etienne, and I can see that I'm much higher than general consensus and even general chatter on Twitter. And from what I've seen, man, he's a very divisive player. People are either really all in on Travis Etienne or they're really all out. He's currently being drafted on Fantasy Pros in redraft as running back 14, which I think is way too low. To give you an idea, here's a couple of names who are going ahead of him: Ken Walker, Breece Hall, Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, who we just talked about, Tony Pollard, and then a few guys who are probably more deserving on it. But I think I'm taking Travis Etienne over all of those guys. I think that he's been drafted pretty much at his floor. If you see, I think what people are forgetting, right, is we give rookie running backs, we give them plenty of rope, right? We see how they do in their first season, and then we kind of think from there, sky's the limit. But for some reason, we've all collectively, the general community has decided that Travis Etienne is not worthy of that sort of rookie running back range, right? So even though he played his first season last year, no doubt, here's what I can see. There's no doubt he has some flaws, and they can be fairly fatal flaws. But if you look at how his season started, it wasn't great. His first 4 games, he put up 6 fantasy points, 7 fantasy points, 9 fantasy points, and 3 fantasy points. And the reason that was happening was because everyone was like, oh, James Robinson, he's the guy. And it desperately looked that way. James Robinson, in his first 4 games of last season, 11 attempts, 66 yards and touchdown, 64 yards, 100 yards. You would look at that and you'd probably start thinking like, hey, this James Robinson guy, he's pretty good. What happened to him? He got traded. And in fact, as James Robinson's rushing attempts started to go down, that's when Travis Etienne's started to go up. And if you actually have a look, you can actually see how the path of the attempts for Travis Etienne goes up. It starts with 4 attempts, 9, 13, 8, 10, 10. And then he became the guy. So it's 10, 10, 14, 24, 28. Then they played a game in Kansas City, and then they're on bye, and then he got injured. And that's when it all sort of fell off. But once they sort of handed him the keys, he started putting up some really, really awesome numbers.
Yeah, so I like Etienne because with Dan, you haven't looked at Travis Etienne's stats at all, did you, from last season?
Yeah,
you did. So I was just looking at them. I forgot that Travis Etienne had 1,120 rushing yards last year in the regular season and 316 receiving yards. So he's had 1,400 yards as essentially a rookie. So I'm quite happy with that. And like you said, slow start to the season, James Robinson there, et cetera, et cetera. But not only that, everyone's also got to remember, because we all remember Jacksonville in the playoffs, Jacksonville coming back down 27 against the Chargers and coming back and winning and, pushing the Chiefs in the next round and everything. But I think we've also forgotten that after week 8 last year, at the end of week 8 last year, the Jags were 2-6.
That's what I wanted to bring up was the difference in regime and schematically how they changed from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. And some of that impacted Etienne and some of it didn't. But the Jags were a completely different team. For me, when I'm looking at stats, my number one stat in fantasy football is team first downs. And you might say, but John, that has nothing to do with fantasy football. Why would you think that? And because for me, the more first downs, the more opportunity. If your team's not getting first downs, the drives are stalling. They're not moving forward. This is a team that's going to be, we expect to be, take a step forward. In their second year with Doug Peterson, Trevor Lawrence has got together. We're all expecting them to sort of be a top half offense. And that's where I think that the running back like Travis Etienne can benefit from that. Now, a lot of people are also saying, and Dan, I'm about to Eminem you / rabbit you by pointing out his flaws, and then that way you won't be able to use them against me. His flaws have been his receptions. He only had 35 receptions last year. Obviously, that was probably in the bottom half. And any way you slice it, if you look at his receptions, they're not good. PFF graded him 41 in total, pretty much based off of that. And then the other thing that people are talking about is Tank Bigsby. Some people are actually worried about Tank Bigsby. And the way that I see Tank Bigsby is he is basically, to me, this year's Zamir White. Do we all remember last year when Zamir White was going to come in and steal the show from Josh Jacobs, and it was like this clear path forward, and Josh Jacobs was on his way out? That's the way I see Tank Bigsby in this situation. Tank Bigsby is not coming in to replace Travis Etienne or take touches away from him. He's coming in to spell him. He's coming in to replace JaMychal Hasty, because between the two of them, it's just the JaMychal Hasty show or the Travis Etienne show.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think with that Tank Bigsby argument is the same people who are coming in and saying that Tank Bigsby is going to take over. It doesn't matter that he was was he a fifth or sixth round pick?
Tank Bigsby was a third round pick. He was the 88th overall pick. So he does have a tiny little bit of draft capital there.
Yeah, but this is the problem, though. Everyone will sit there and go, draft capital, it doesn't matter because Tank Bigsby's the better running back. He's the better running back. But then a lot of those same people will then have the argument when you look at a different team and they're like, well, they have to use that guy. He was a first round draft pick. You've got to use the draft capital. That doesn't work. Like, at the end of the day, the coaches use the best player they find for the job, because, I mean, we saw it in Kansas City last year. By the end of the year, and yes, granted he got hurt, but Isaiah Pacheco was the lead running back, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was a first-round running back, wasn't even being dressed for games by the end of the season. So that's not really here nor there. I'm not really using that as an argument.
We'll get into that another day. That's another topic for another day.
That's another topic. But the Travis Etienne is still the first round pick of that team. He is good friends with Trevor Lawrence, who's the face of your franchise. He has that cohesion with Trevor Lawrence. He's been in that offense now. Yes, he's only been, last year was his first year playing, but he's been around the team for 2 years, et cetera, et cetera. But like you said, yeah, Tank Bigsby is going to be that guy who spells Travis Etienne, who takes over that JaMychal Hasty role. And, okay, so maybe Etienne doesn't have the 28 carry game that he was having before. He might lose 6 of those carries. So he might be a 22 carry a game player. And Tank Bigsby might pick up them plus whatever JaMychal Hasty was doing. But it's not going to be to the extent of going, well, now I've got to completely fade Etienne and go with not JaMychal Hasty, with Tank Bigsby, because in my mind, he's a better running back.
Yeah, Brad, I love what you said. Hold that thought, because we're going to come back to that. Sorry, Dan, I'm not even close to done. So a lot of the other argument as well is, let's look at the glaring weakness of Travis Etienne that he had last year. It was high-value touches inside the 5 and the 10-yard line. He was one of the worst in the league. He was. There's no way about it. Tank Bigsby, the narrative that he's going to come in and take away those high-value touches from Travis Etienne, who couldn't do a good job. Tank Bigsby is 6 foot, 110 pounds at the moment. Travis Etienne is 5'10", a tiny little bit smaller. He's 215 pounds, a bit older as well. Tank Bigsby's smaller than Travis Etienne in that weight. And then to what you were saying, Brad, about the pass catching. Let's go back to Clemson when Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne played together. I'm just trying to find my game logs. I'm going to share my screen for this so that we can have a look at a few of the stats together. Can I see? Yes, here we go. Here is the 2020 game logs for Travis Etienne, who didn't have a very good pass catching season last year. Off to a sort of a slow start, 3 catches, 1 catch. But then against Virginia, a good school, 5 catches, 114 yards. Against Miami, 8 catches, 73 yards. Against Boston College, granted, not a big school, but 7 catches, 140 yards. Notre Dame in a game that they lost, 8 catches, 57 yards. And then finishing in another loss to Ohio State, 4 catches, 64 yards. The next thing that I just want to bring up, so I think that the 35 receptions for me I think that that's his base level. This is another spreadsheet that I run each year, and if you're opposed to gambling, maybe tune away for this next bit. But basically what I do every season is I go through and I track all of the players and all of their props, all their rushing yards, their rushing attempt props, receiving, scrimmage, and then you'll see a green means that they hit it, a red means that they didn't hit it, and a dark red means that they got injured. And if you have a look at Travis Etienne, you, like me, would have made a lot of money from betting over his rushing yards and under his receptions. And the reason I bring this up is because what I'm trying to say here is this to me is not about, oh, well, he sucks, he didn't even hit it. This to me is all public perception. This is where people are willing to put their money. People are not privy to the fact that he was an awesome rusher who week in and week out was pretty much hitting it, except for when he started to get injured. And the public perception was that he was going to have a lot of receptions. If it's in white, it means that they got that exactly. And all year we had this perception that he was going to be more of a receiving back in his first year. And I haven't even got to the fact of the part where we always talk about the idea that people coming off these injuries, these high ankle sprains, these torn ACLs, they don't really come back the next year and they're good as new. They usually take a little bit longer. And I said last week on the show, I'm very big on my post-hype sleepers. I think that Travis Etienne is a massive, massive post-hype sleeper. I just want to finish. I'm going to finish now, I promise, on one last little tidbit that I was looking at today. And it's just classic game logs. We go and have a look through their season. They started with the Commanders, and you'll see in the game logs, it is very much what I was saying before at the start. James Robertson, 11 carries, 66 yards. And that goes on for many, many weeks up until the point where finally Etienne started to get his groove on, his going. And you remember this Eagles game, this was torrential rain. Even though the Jags got 3 touchdowns, there was no real opportunity there. But then Etienne started to really go off up to the point where he got injured. And do you remember in that game against the Ravens where he got injured? To replace him, he had 2 carries. To replace him was Jermichael Hasty. And do we all remember Jared Connor? Anyone draft Jared Connor last year? I don't remember Jared Connor. Do you think maybe Tank Bigsby could be a better player than Jared Connor? I think so as well. Let's go have a look at the Chargers game in the playoffs where they came back and won and they were down. Oh, look, there is absolutely no other running back in the entire game who got a touch other than Travis Etienne. There's also some other examples. I won't keep beating a dead horse, but what I'm trying to say is he's on a great team, great coaching staff. He's got the opportunities. He's going to be better than in his second year. He's coming back from injury. Here it is, the big announcement. I think Travis Etienne has top 5 upside.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Roberts. Thank you very much, John.
Can you tell I was thinking about this today? I should have been working.
It was Trust me, that was impressive. I'm on your side. That's all I'm going to say. I'm on your side. I think he's a buy this year. I think he could be quite good. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Okay. So top 5 ceiling, I think, is within his possibilities, but I don't see it happening. His big games, his snap share was all over 70%. A lot of them were high 70% snap share. The coaches have already come out and said they're going to pull his workload back. So the chances of him getting his big games where he's getting 24, 25 carries a game, I can't see them doing that. They're trying to keep him healthy.
Can I just jump in there? I was reading an article the other day about this, where running back coach said there's a lot more there. There's a lot more. We talk about it every day. He knows it too. It's one thing to talk about it, your coach, the player doesn't realize, but when the player realizes what you're talking about, it's true. He's going to do everything he can to make sure he gets better and he bodes well. And Doug Peterson was saying the same thing in this article. This is from NBC. They expect more from Travis Etienne. And I think that what they're also basically detailing in the article is they're going to give him more.
That's not more touches, though. That's more efficiency.
Well, I'm not. Yeah.
Granted, if his efficiency boosts up, the lack of not lack of touches, but the scaling down of touches may counteract each other. I don't know, because you've got coaches coming out already saying they want to scale back his workload from what it was. They don't want him having those big carry games where he made all his points for fantasy. When he was, I don't know what to expect from Tank Bigsby, but I know he's going to be better than James Robinson. I know he's going to be better than Jermichael Hasty. They've got Dearness Johnson there as well this year.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, he was great in Cleveland.
But where he's being drafted and where he's being ranked, I think he's almost at his ceiling for where he's going to be ranked.
Really? See, I think he's been drafted at his floor. I think that the rushing yards, the attempts, so 220 attempts, 35 receptions, he had all the targets that he needed. And if you actually look at his game log, it's, 3 of 3, 2 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, 2 of 2. He was catching everything towards the end of the year. It's just that first half where the Jags were bad and they were 2-4 or 2-5 or whatever, and they needed to turn their season around.
And when they did that, like you said, he was the guy. And he'll be the guy this year as well, but I don't think it'll be on the scale of what it was last year. I think Tank Bigsby is more than capable of taking a good workload as well. So it'll be interesting to see how much they use him early in the season and then how much they use him as the season progresses for Bigsby. Yeah, now, I'm not saying Tank Bigsby is a world-class running back. I think he's going to be just fine. But I think he's going to be, like you said, he won't scare people away from Etienne to the point where Etienne's going to become nothing. But to have him where he's ranked at the moment, I just don't know how comfortable I'd be seeing him reach that each year.
My question is, the coaches have come out and said, we want to give him a less workload. But is that coach speak? Because remember, like, Ron Rivera has been a great one for this. We're going to get this guy the ball more. We're going to get this guy the ball more.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
He's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, it doesn't. A lot of coaches come out and say this, but even if he goes from, as I was saying, even if he goes from a 26 carry a game guy to a 20 carry a game guy, if he increases his efficiency, then that 1,100 yards becomes 1,300 rushing yards. That 300 yards receiving becomes 500. So then you're looking at a guy who's 1,800 yards a season sort of thing. Yes, he's, and like was that, a lot of this is difficult because, it's just pure projection and everyone's looking at things a little bit differently. But in my mind, if, yes, he drops a few carries per game, but what you might also see happen is they have every intention of dropping him down 5-6 touches per game, but then they get into the game and it suddenly gets close. And okay, we need our best guys back out on the field. Travis Etienne's out there for every single play, every drive. He only comes off very quickly for plays when they're just going, 5 receivers, whatever it might be. So it sounds, I get where you're coming from, Dan, because coming from coaches, you're trying to believe what they say, how they're looking at it, because honestly, they might believe that as of right now. But I think as the game gets going, as it suddenly comes down to crunch time, you're going to see these guys, the best players, are going to be out on the field. And I think you might see, maybe as the season goes on, you might see Etienne creep back up towards those same numbers that he had at the end of the last season.
And the other thing about
you guys are
Etienne,
looking at it as absolute best case scenario, where how often do we see absolute best case scenario pan out during a fantasy season? There's a number of factors at play. Doug Peterson himself likes the committee backfield as well.
that's true. And I think Doug Peterson is probably he's more of a hindrance to Etienne than he is going to help him. But I just think that all the pieces are there. I think that we would look back on this season at the end of the season, and if Etienne is in that top 10, we'd probably say like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Etienne he's second last year in broken tackle rate, second in average yards after the catch. He's fourth in rushing yards over expectation as well. Expected attempts. Like his rushing is absolutely awesome. And I love broken tackle rate personally for running backs. It's one of my favorite stats to measure them by. It's why I was so high on Kareem Hunt when in his first year coming into the league, because he had such a high broken tackle rate.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm on the Etienne train, but
You are now, Brad.
I can understand. I can understand from Dan's point of view too. Like, what if it doesn't all come to fruition? Then yeah, I get what you're saying, Dan.
I'm not saying I'm completely off him either, because I love him as well. I just think there's a lot of factors in play here where he could disappoint to where he's being drafted at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. And the last thing that I'll say about him as well is I think he massively passes the eyeball test as well as any other running back out there. Like his burst and his explosiveness, I think, is one of the best in the league. And he's almost one of those sort of like horizontal runners where if he's like checking out, cutting a corner and then going downhill, he gets on those angles and he just explodes. Particularly that game that they played in London last year. I can't even remember who it was against. Actually, I've got the schedule here. But Etienne was awesome in that game against, was it the Texans? No, I don't think so. Oh, against the Broncos. That was the one in which they lost. Yeah. So yeah, for me, I'm like right up on Etienne, and I've got him on my dynasty team, but like I'm very, very happy with him. So we will see, won't we? We won't know.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to check back at the end of the season.
Yeah. If someone clips this, it's either going to make me or break me. We'll see. I believe Etienne. I believe. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to Etienne and why you're low on him, Dan?
No, I think I covered it all. I think, yeah. I think a lot of little things that are going to build up to a big thing.
Yeah.
For me, for where he's being ranked at the moment, yeah, I just see him taking a hit from that personally.
Cool. Brad, do you want to go with your running back that you're low on, and then we'll close out. We'll finish off with mine.
So my running back that I'm low on this year is Javonte Williams from the Broncos. Now, I love Javonte. I was super high on him coming out of college. If anyone remembers in college, himself and Michael Carter had that game. I think it was against Virginia or Virginia Tech, where they ran for about 8,000 yards between them. They both, I think it ended up being about 550 yards the two running backs went for or something in this game. But I like him as a prospect, but his injury is the big downfall for me. Now, you've already said it, John, like running backs especially, you don't want that running back the year after a major injury like an ACL. You want them the year after the year after.
Yeah.
So to me, Javonte would be a guy for next year, because then by this time next year, he's had another 12 months on that knee. He's got his confidence back. I mean, you see it with AFL players as well, like all the time in Aussie rules footy, that first 6 weeks afterwards, they're very hesitant to do normal movements just because they're trying to build that trust back up in their knees and stuff like that. So I'm lower on him. And also, too, they brought in Samaje Perine, and he signed for them because he got a call from Sean Payton, who said, "Have you seen how I use running backs?"
Yeah,
And
why
that
would
was
you go
all-
anywhere else?
And that is all
Yeah.
that Samaje Perine needed. And Sean Payton is that guy. You think back, it was Reggie Bush and Darren Sproles. It was Mark Ingram and Darren Sproles. It was Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. It was Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, and then Mark Ingram came back, and then it was so he's a guy who he always uses the multiple running backs. Javonte is not going to get the same workload that he was getting last year or the previous season, because of the way that Sean Payton uses his running backs, and you'll see quite possibly a 50-50 split evenly. But it's just, to me, the main thing is the injury. I don't like getting a running back the year after they've done their injury. My other guy I was choosing for in this was J.K. Dobbins, which, he was last year
Similar.
with similar sort of thing, but he also got injured again last year because it was the overcompensation injury that you see quite often. So, but yeah, Javonte is my fade for this year, but he's also the guy this is going to be one of those weird things. I'm lower on him than others, but I'm also advocating for trying to trade for him towards the end of the season in preparation for the 2024 season.
Yeah, so you think towards the end of the year, you might come back around on him?
I'd say so, because if I was doing a startup right now, I would not pick Javonte so he's RB15 on Dynasty Pros at the Fantasy Pros Dynasty rankings at the moment. I wouldn't pick him 15. Like I said, there's guys behind him that I would prefer this year, but he would be a guy towards the end of the season that I'd be looking at. A lot of people might, because you see this quite often, they lose faith in the running back. The value drops. They try and get anything they can for this running back, and then you'll see then the following season is when they really take off, and that person who's traded them away hates themselves for letting him go for next to nothing. So he's a guy that, if I was doing a startup right now, I'm probably not touching with a 10-foot pole, but he's a guy who come towards the end of the season, and if you've got your deadlines in your leagues, like your trading deadlines, he'd be a guy I'd be looking to see how far his value's dropped, and then just try and aim for that, that following season once he's had the 12 months after the knee injury, and see how he goes the following season.
And the thing is, with his injury, it wasn't just a clean ACL either. It was the LCL, the PCL, so it was the whole damn knee.
Yeah, I was just literally just about to say, yeah.
Coming back from that, especially early on when he comes back, whether he's healthy, ready to go for week 1, I don't know. But his start to the season when he does get on the field, it's not going to look good. And his value is going to plummet so much. But he's still only 23, so there's a future there for him.
So you think maybe after this year, potentially looking at when people are down on him, see, like I'm concerned about the knee. I think he's really badly hurt it to the point where I don't know that he'll actually be as good as he sort of ever was.
Yeah, I don't think he'll reach what people are hoping he does moving forward.
Yeah, ever again.
Even a couple of years down the line.
Yeah.
Because I don't think teams are going to want to put that much pressure on him with the high workload.
No, but see, that's where you'll see towards the end of this year, if he's only getting that 50-50 sort of split and someone has drafted him high up in their league, that they go, well, what can I actually get for him? They might put him on a trade block, and the best offer that you get is like a 4th round rookie pick or a 3rd round rookie pick. Now, if I'm in a league and I've got a 3rd round rookie pick or something, if a Javonte owner is just like, do you know what, he's been, we're week 16 or week 14 of the season, and Javonte's had 400 yards, and he just hasn't looked like himself. He's just not looked great. Like, they might be at that stage where they're going, look, I will take nearly anything to get rid of this guy from my team. So if he's at that capacity and I could go pick him up, like, it's a dart throw. Like,
oh, you'll 100% make that move every time.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you were thinking of it, say it was this year's draft, like, who were some of these guys that you're seeing in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds of these rookie drafts? Like, I've seen guys like Puka Nakua was one, A.T. Perry was another one. Like, I've seen some of these guys who, Clayton Tune was a 5th round rookie. Like, bringing it back to last week.
Deal.
That's that sounds good.
but Aiden O'Connell, these types of guys who might not actually play at all. So if I had to pick and it was supposed to have been Aiden O'Connell, or I could trade that and get Javonte Williams, like, yeah, why not try that and just see what happens? He might not ever become that RB1 again, but he might be that solid flex guy, RB2 for your team during the season. So that's where I'm sort of looking at. I'm not actually expecting him to, I hope he does, just because you don't want to see these guys have their careers ruined by injuries and stuff like that. So I really do hope that he comes back and he ends up being that Javonte that everyone loved coming out of the draft. But if he doesn't, why not just throw a down, or like, an offer out there and see what you can get for him?
Not to mention, if you jump on Sleeper today, you'll see the number one trending player is Jaleel McLaughlin, who is a rookie who is apparently impressing in Broncos camp at the moment. So he's getting a bit of hype. I'm looking on Rotoball from earlier today and NFL beat writers on Twitter. McLaughlin, an undrafted rookie who had more than 8,000 rushing yards in a 5-career year at Youngstown State. Never heard of that one, I have to admit. Showed speed, vision, and decisiveness with no pads. So no pads on, sure, but it is the season of you get one piece of positive news, and it looks like 13,000 people are interested in you. So we'll see. I think that's a great call, Brad.
Thank you. I don't have many of them, but I'll take them when I can.
No, you're the key cog in the wheel of the show, is the way I see it. Now, let's close it out. I want to talk about someone who's pretty high up in the ranks that I'm pretty down on. And for me, it's Jonathan Taylor. And he's going as RB5 in redraft at the moment. And in Dynasty, he's going as RB2. We've been talking a lot. It's funny what all the things that we all have in common for this show today is that they're all sort of like being injured or coming off injury, sort of working their way back into it. And the difference with Jonathan Taylor is he actually played through his injury for a lot of the season last year. He did develop a high ankle sprain, which it's hard to play on. It's hard to even recover from. It is one of the longer recovery rates. He did drop off. He had a pretty down season for where he was drafted last season. I haven't even got to the part where we talk about the fact that he's got a new quarterback, a rookie quarterback. I've already talked about how much I care about first downs, which rookie quarterbacks do sort of struggle with and sort of take a few games to find their way. And then the fact that it's Anthony Richardson, of all people, who is probably going to steal a couple of goal line touchdowns from him, if not high-value touches inside the 5 and the 10 as well. At RB2 in Dynasty and at running back 5 in redraft, that is too rich for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same with you. It's also too that, it seems like he had the breakout season. He had, the back end of the rookie season, the breakout, and then it just feels like it's just been injuries and injuries.
Yeah.
The Colts, he's a free agent after this season, so he's in a contract year, but will the Colts, will they try and design much up for him, or will they sit there and think, well, like you said, Anthony Richardson with Shane Steichen, the new head coach. He sort of similar play style to, playbook to maybe what the Eagles were running with. So is Jonathan Taylor a guy that you really want to be banking on if, like I said, injuries, those other sorts of factors? Yeah, I'm the same as you on that one. I was talking with Dan the other day when he was looking at his running back rankings, and I said to him too that, I would have had Jonathan Taylor a lot lower in my top 10 if I was doing it like that than what a lot of other people would, just because of those sorts of factors.
And speaking of Shane Steichen, think about the way that Miles Sanders was used in the passing game last year as well. It was definitely next to non-existent. He had, I'm looking at it now, 20 catches on the entire season. 20 catches is just not going to do it at any rate. And we like Miles Sanders this year now that he's left the Eagles. He's in Carolina. And I kind of see a similar fate for Jonathan Taylor. He last year had 28 catches. Will that increase by much? And if it does, is that good? Are we happy with that? Are we happy with that at running back 5?
He's so tough to try and judge because I can go either way on him. Because you look at Anthony Richardson coming in, and like you said, and Brad and I have said the same thing, Richardson's going to steal touchdowns at the goal line. It's just going to happen. And we saw how the Eagles used Jalen Hurts at the goal line as well. Richardson's a bigger man than Jalen Hurts, a bigger body. So I think Richardson has every potential to score 10-plus rushing touchdowns his first year. And they'll use him a lot that way. And I think that's the biggest concern for me when it comes to Taylor is how many touchdowns is he going to get? So last year he scored 4 rushing touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor's a better running back than that. He can't have 4 touchdowns again. The reason for 4 touchdowns was the Colts offense was a disaster. Like, that was one of the worst offenses in the league. What sort of uptick are they going to have with a rookie like Anthony Richardson taking over this year? You can argue both ways on that. I don't know if there's going to be a massive uptick early, because I think Richardson's going to struggle early on, and that whole offense could struggle early on. So that limits the amount of carries that Taylor has, the amount of touchdowns he's able to get. But then on the flip side, are we going to see Richardson dump off to Taylor a lot in the passing game until he's comfortable? And then you've got to, as a defense, you've got to account for Anthony Richardson with his rushing as well. So is that going to open up a lot more lanes for Jonathan Taylor to be able to use his rushing ability there? So it's so tough on him because I don't know what to expect from that offense for this year. And moving forward, I think it'll be a lot better than what it has been, obviously. But we saw whatever season it was, Jonathan Taylor had 18 rushing touchdowns. I can't see him reaching those numbers again, but there's every chance he can get back to double-digit touchdowns if that offense picks up any steam. But how much of that goes to Taylor and how much goes to Richardson at the goal line?
So I was just what I'm looking at here is a lot of people's comparison for Anthony Richardson is Cam Newton, which is very understandable, but similar sort of profiles. Now, Cam Newton's rookie season, so 2011, Cam Newton had 126 rushes for 706 yards and 14 touchdowns. That's just rushing the ball. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson isn't going to have that, so to speak, and I know it's different coaching staff and everything like that, but the leading running back on the Panthers team that year was D'Angelo Williams, who rushed for 836 yards and 7 touchdowns. Is there anything that's, are they the sort of numbers that we're going to see for Richardson and Richardson, Jonathan Taylor? Is that sort of going to have, where they're both rushing for, D'Angelo Williams, 830 rushing yards, Cam Newton, 700 rushing yards?
I've also just taken a quick look I've also just taken a quick look at Anthony Richardson at Florida last year. He played with his running backs were Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, as we know. Johnson had 12 receptions on the entire season, and Etienne had 9. And that was the running backs, 12 and 9 receptions.
Well, so you see with the running quarterbacks, you see, and it's the same thing in Chicago with Justin Fields and, Lamar Jackson, all these really good running quarterbacks. They don't necessarily need to dump the ball off to their running back on third and 8 when they're being pressured, because they've got the wheels to move and run away from the DNs and the defensive tackles and the linebackers. You don't need to dump the ball off as much because he's already one of the fastest guys. He's going to be one of the fastest guys out on the field as it is. So he could either dump it off to Jonathan Taylor, or he could just use his wheels and take off and take his, this is going to be a 12-yard sack, and it's now suddenly it's first and goal after a 35-yard rush down the field because he's broken away from the tackles and he's been caught by the safety.
Yeah. 100%. Just to finish on Jonathan Taylor, if you like him, if you're a bit higher on him, there is like a little bit of saving grace. If you look at his game logs from last year, they are fairly impressive. 21 touches, 82 yards, 20 touches, 86 yards, 22 touches, 84 yards, 22 touches, 147. And that's against Vegas. There's some good ones against Houston as well. And Houston, as we know, was sort of easy to beat up on in the run game last season. So when he gets the ball, he is effective with it, and they give him the ball a lot. But I need to see it before I touch him at RB5, drafting him in the first round.
We need to see him stay healthy as well now.
Yeah, and that's
started to build up a little bit.
Yeah, and the high ankle sprain, it concerns me. It's really concerning. I think, and like I was saying, like this year I might be down on him, but look, next year I might be back up on him. We just need to see a few things first. But that's going to do it. And I think that was pretty respectable timing as well. I think this has been great. What an awesome conversation to talk about.
I don't think we suffered any sophomore slump this week, so I think we're looking good.
Looking good. Any final notes before we sign off?
No, I just think the only other person I think just to keep an eye out for, if you want to look for someone who could have a decent role this year and not much of a competition, would be Rachaad White. Tampa Bay's not great. His competition is Sean Tucker.
He's in line for a lot of work. Yeah. Will they bring Leonard Fournette back, as we talked about at the top of the show?
No.
I think if Sean Tucker's able to stay healthy, he had that heart condition, which was a massive concern. But if Sean Tucker's able to stay healthy, I think he's a better running back.
Possibly, but I guess then when you look at it, would a team be willing to risk it on a guy who's had heart issues to have him for this year at least? Like, he could be the guy next year, but maybe early on it'd be, if your quarterback's Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, they are the quarterbacks who would be dumping off to the running back a lot more than an Anthony Richardson or a Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. It's the only reason I'd even consider Rachaad White. I'm trying to stay well away from that Buccaneers backfield.
Brad, I did a trade last year that might make you fall off your seat in my Dynasty League. It was, I traded away Dameon Pierce and Rachaad White, who I drafted back-to-back with pick 205 and 206 to go out and get Najee Harris. A lot of people said that I got fleeced, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm high on Najee this year, and maybe in another episode we'll talk about Brad. He's just hands over his head. He cannot believe it.
Oh, I'm not a fan of that trade.
Had you a beard, Brad, you would be stretching it vehemently.
Yeah, no, I would have taken the young guys over Najee, but hey, that's why it's your team and not mine. So
hey man, that's why I've won 2 titles in the last 3 years. All right. So I make some highly suspect trades. I will be the first to admit that. And we've got plenty more shows coming where I'm going to divulge into them and Brad's going to lose his mind. Some more. We're going to be back next week. We're going to be talking wide receivers that we're high on and low on. We're going to have a few, hopefully we'll get a few more guests on the show as well, because it'd be awesome to be able to talk about this with more people. And I think more people sound like they're going to be excited for that. And once Scott Fish ramps up and all the leagues start to ram up, I'm looking forward to July. July is here. That means training camp is starting soon. And then August is the season. Preseason, I should say.
July is one of the most fun months on the NFL calendar because we finally start to get back into everything properly.
Yeah.
Like we had a little bit of the OTAs and that sort of thing, but July is when it really ramps up and the excitement picks up as well.
And I definitely feel like with your company, this off-season hasn't been long. It feels like it's been good. I've been enjoying it. And the show's been going well.
Good. Plenty more to come.
We'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to the Saturday Air Raid, part of the NFL Lab Network. Bye for now.